From KUNC and the NPR network, this is In The NoCo. I'm Brad Turner, in today for Erin O'Toole. There's a lot of content these days about self-care, how to stay mentally and physically balanced when work or family or other stresses grind you down. Social media influencers love this stuff.
Self-care, fellas, from journaling your daily thoughts to your daily affirmations, it's all a part of a bigger goal, and that's peace.
The second you are done with work, hop into the shower. It signals to your brain that it's the second part of your day. It's time to focus on you.
I always do an at-home facial that typically includes a double cleanse, a facial steam, and some form of clarifying or exfoliating mask.
But a new book argues that self-care isn't simply about you. It's a crucial part of how we show up for other people. And losing sight of that can lead to guilt or strained relationships with loved ones. Author Jordan Quaglia is a professor of psychology at Naropa University in Boulder. His new book is called From Self-Care to We Care, The New Science of Mindful Boundaries and Caring from an Undivided Heart. Jordan spoke with me about the book and how he hopes it nudges readers away from the more selfish or even materialistic versions of self-care.
Certainly, self-care has become not just a personal practice, but a kind of cultural view and a capitalistic approach or buzzword. I just saw an advertisement the other day where the term self-care is being used to sell a product to people. And so I think like many terms, mindfulness is another term where it gets repurposed a lot to serve as a kind of invitation to purchase something or a catchy term that makes us feel good. And so I think that is one of the sides of self-care that could be problematic, especially if it's reinforcing or activating this kind of either-or mindset around our care.
Jordan, you write about how self-care often looks inward and focuses on the individual. What do you think is lost when self-care is more of an individual thing?
There are times, and I think we all fall into this at times, when our self-care becomes somewhat divided or disconnected from our sense of care to others. Maybe self-care becomes a way of avoiding something or skipping out on a social interaction that would actually better support our well-being. But if we zoom out just a little bit, taking time to ourselves to do something, an activity that's nourishing to us, can be a way of supporting others in our life as well.
Do you have a story or some research that illustrates that idea?
So I think a simple example would be if you consider a mother of a newborn child who is maybe leaving the house for the very first time and is feeling guilty about leaving the home to do something for themselves. Maybe it's get a massage or connect with a friend that they haven't seen in a long time. And they might feel a sense of guilt, especially if they're leaving behind a stressed out father and a crying baby. But from a we care perspective, they could remember that that act of self-care, taking that time for themselves, was actually an opportunity to strengthen their well-being and perhaps model self-care or we care to their family in ways that supported the entire family system. So I think that kind of more interconnected view helps push against that sense of inner conflict and guilt that sometimes arises, and makes the self-care deeper in a way, because we recognize we're not just doing it for ourselves, but we're doing it for others in our life that we care about too.
We're taking a minute for ourselves so we can show up more strongly for others.
That's right.
And we care is this alternate concept you offer to self-care, this more collective version of self-care. I'm imagining a teacher who comes home from a day of looking after a classroom full of kids and she wants some quiet time. Are you saying that the time spent watching the kids is more healthy than the time spent unwinding?
Yeah, that's a wonderful example in the sense that sometimes we need to toggle back and forth. We need to sort of emphasize self-care, such as after a long day, we get home, we're exhausted from the workplace, and we need to lean into self-care in those moments. So it's perfectly fine to sort of sequence our self-care in that kind of way, where it supports and nourishes us so we're ready to go for the very next day. But I think in most professions, sort of the ideal approach would be that while we're at the workplace, we're not losing sight of self-care. So throughout the day, we kind of touch into our own needs and we don't lose sight of them. And in that way, when the end of the day comes, maybe we're feeling still more in touch with our vitality because we haven't sacrificed ourselves along the way.
You write about human evolution as part of your argument for collectively taking care of ourselves. Talk about what's restorative in terms of the brain when people communicate and spend time together.
Well, one thing we can highlight is that there were competitive advantages of cooperation for our ancestors. And so what this suggests is our brains find it naturally rewarding to care for others in many instances. And probably the most rewarding thing is when we can cooperate with others, when there's a sense of alignment between our goals and their goals. And research suggests that our brains find this naturally rewarding even in the absence of extrinsic reward. So we feel good when we are cooperating with others.
Let's say somebody hears this interview and wants to start to embrace caring for others in the way that you advocate. Where should they get started with this practice?
Yeah, I think one simple way of beginning is just reflecting, what if taking time to care for myself or to set a boundary that protects my time and energy wasn't just about me, but it was about supporting and protecting my energy for the causes and the people that matter most to me? And so I have a practice in the book called reverse self-care. And the general idea is that usually we approach self-care primarily from intentions to support our own well-being. But in reverse self-care, we sort of flip the script and we think about someone else who stands to benefit from that self-care activity in our life. Who would reasonably benefit from us being more in touch with our vitality or feeling greater well-being? And then as we start the self-care activity, we reflect on how we're doing this not only for ourselves and our own well-being, but we're also doing this as an act of care for that person that we've identified. And it's a little counterintuitive, but people usually find that practicing reverse self-care leads to deeper self-care because they are able to see that they're not just doing this for themselves, but they're doing it for at least two people.
Are there any particular self-care practices or approaches that you find especially unhelpful after researching this topic?
I think that my research suggests, and other research suggests, that self-care really becomes unhealthy and sort of toxic when it becomes overly divided and self-indulgent or materialistic. And one way of seeing this is when people are practicing self-care as a way of avoiding something in their life. I think that looks different for each person, but I do think that there are times when people practice self-care in more of a selfish kind of way.
So if fancy scented candles are your thing, good on you, but make sure you're not using them to avoid something.
That's right. Yeah, I think that, people fortunately don't have to compromise the quality of their self-care, but hopefully they can reflect more on whether that thing that they're doing, buying those scented candles or something like that, is nourishing them genuinely. And if it's nourishing them genuinely, then hopefully it's also helping them show up more fully for others in their life too.
Jordan Qualia's new book is called From Self-Care to We Care. He'll give a talk about the book at the Boulder bookstore on May 29th. We'll include links in our show notes and at KUNC.org. That's it today for In The NoCo. I'm Brad Turner. Thanks for listening.